very excited to have her here. Please put your hands together for Jessica Hawk, the Corporate Vice President for Data and AI. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. So exciting to be in a room with everybody. And I know you guys have been thinking about this for a while, but this is the first time I've done this in a room full of folks, and so I'm very excited to be here. Richard got you to clap already, so I'm going to ask you to do something slightly different. I'm going to ask everybody to take a breath in. Oh, you did it. And out. I do that for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's actually a good way to sort of start a conversation. It's opening up the brain. We got something pretty interesting to talk about. It's a super exciting emerging space. But the other reason is because I think everybody should feel really proud. You're here, it's 8 a.m., and it's in Vegas. So congratulations. Feel proud for your showing up on time. And let's get into it. So why are we here? We're here to talk about AI and innovation, how AI is driving outcomes like automation that I think everybody's probably pretty familiar with in the room. But I think if I put my I'm at a company hat on, I do think that there is this sense of expectation that we all know a lot about this space. And I kind of think that might be, it's a big ask. It's a little bit like when the internet first came out, for those of you who were around at the time. And there was that moment where either the board had just had a meeting and they're very aware of the opportunity that it creates, and so there's some expectation that there's a strategy to enable it. Or I've had experience with this one personally. You are at the coffee spot in the office on Monday morning, and an executive in the team stops by, and they had just flown from somewhere, and they had gone into the airport lounge, and they picked up a magazine, and they read an article that talked about everything that was happening with AI, and they say, what's our activation strategy? So I think those things are happening, and I know we're all in different places in terms of how we understand how all of this comes together. And so my job today, I think, is just to kind of walk you through what we're seeing here at Microsoft. I run the data and AI product marketing team. So Rohan Kumar, who he mentioned earlier, he's my partner in crime. And I want to walk you through what we're seeing. I want to talk a little bit about where these things are actually showing up at your desktop or out in your personal life already, and then show you some examples of customers who are taking advantage of this opportunity. And really the goal here is to just share what we know about what we're seeing across the board, and the idea is to open up the mind and to allow your imagination to wander, and to maybe think about this as, it's certainly a heavy tech conversation, but it does give us the opportunity to be a little bit more creative and open up our imagination to what's possible. So I ask you to breathe, get the oxygen flowing, and let's get into it. So I got to grab the clicker. I'm going to roll a video, and then we'll roll through it. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's not the video yet. The reason why we have this picture up is because I want to tell you a story about where I'm personally experiencing what I think is happening across the planet. It's a picture of the start-stop button on my Tesla. I got a Tesla during COVID. I took delivery of the vehicle. When you turn the thing on, it says, do you want to participate in data collection so that you might be able to use the fully self-driving feature? And so for those of you who don't know, it's not like you get the thing and it just immediately can roll out and the car can drive you to where you're trying to go. They actually ask to track you so that they can make sure that you meet a certain standard of safety before you can participate in the beta. And so at the time I got the car, I said sure, and then I basically forgot about it. A couple weeks ago, my husband and my son and daughter and I got in the car to go to the grocery store on the weekend, and when the car turned on the screen said, congratulations, you are eligible to participate in the fully self-driving beta. And frankly, I'd kind of forgotten about it, because the car can do things like sense where you are in your lane, it can do auto, speed correction and all that. So in my mind, I was already getting the functionality, and I just really hadn't thought too much about, do I need it to drive me to the office? And so, it's one of those moments where, and just a little bit about me, I'm the person, the guidance is that you maintain 2 car lengths between you and the vehicle in front of you. I'm like 5 to 6. And so I'm naturally I'm a little bit adverse to anything that's going to be risky. And so I looked at my husband, looked back at the kids, and we kind of said, sure, let's try it. So click the button, had already got the address to the store in there, and started driving. And it tells you to keep your hands on the wheel, but it's doing everything else for you. And so, it was crazy. There were screams, there were laughs, there was me clutching my stomach. At one point we did a hard left turn and the steering wheel really, really pivots. It rolls around a couple of times and we're all kind of thinking, oh my gosh, what's happening? But at the end of it, it was kind of fun. And I would basically liken it to a roller coaster. And so on Monday, when I was driving into the office, I was thinking about this moment, and I was thinking, how can I make this real? How can I explain what we're seeing? And the thing that occurred to me was today, so it's less than 2 weeks after this happened, and yes, I've done it a couple of times since. I've gone from didn't even think about it, forgotten it was an option, wasn't sure if I wanted to click the button. I screamed the most in the car without question. My son thought it was amazing. To if I were to go buy a car tomorrow, I'd be angry and probably wouldn't buy it if it wasn't going to give me the option. So in less than 2 weeks, a person who's sort of classically adverse to this kind of risk-taking went from not important to have to have it. And I think that's what we're hoping to talk about today. That's what we're seeing in our customer conversations, that it's no longer a nice to have, it's no longer a science experiment, it's no longer, if you're a list maker like I am, I've got my to-do list, it's a page long, there's a section of the stuff that I know I'm actually gonna do, and then there's something at the bottom, it's if I get to it, it's not in that row anymore, it's way up top, and there's an expectation that we deliver these kinds of experiences. And the other thing I'd say is it's very similar to when internet first came out. It's very similar to what we saw when we transitioned from web to mobile, where what we experienced as consumers was now an expectation at the workplace. So employee engagement and, of course, customer experience. So it's both, it's expected experience and it's not expected just outside, it's expected in your day-to-day work experience. And so if this resonates with you, you're not alone. So we did a survey this year, and I do say this year on purpose, because I think that when we talk about survey results, given the current economic climate, it's important to know that this is recent information. We surveyed over 1,600 business leaders, and they said 79% of them were saying it's an amazing high growth opportunity. And their top 3 benefits were improved processes, which I think we all naturally understand, boosting workforce productivity, and we're going to show you some examples of that today, and then these enhanced customer experiences. And so if I go to the next slide, there's 3 statistics here that kind of unpack that a little bit. It's happening now, it's happening fast. And then this third one is the one that is most interesting to me. So I've been in IT for decades, and for those of you who've been on the journey as well, showing positive business results in less than 2 years on any kind of IT initiative, particularly one that includes data, and especially one that's about something that's a little bit new, that's a pretty incredible statistic. So it's happening now. It's driving growth and improving everybody's experience. So if I were to want to start to unpack the how part of this, the first thing I want to make sure everybody's thinking about is how you're already experiencing this in what we call Microsoft 1P. So the things that you use that are Microsoft SaaS-based solutions. So it's Office, it's Teams, it's Xbox. Because the things that I'm going to talk about today in terms of what we can offer our customers, it's the same technology that's driving the AI-driven experiences in those applications. So the point there is it's actually already happening, everybody's already using it, and these same capabilities are available to build your own applications on. So now I'm going to roll the video.
Every day, artificial intelligence helps us navigate our work and personal lives in so many ways. From recognizing your face when you sign in the morning, to making your meetings more inclusive and efficient, to helping you with daily tasks, to finding new adventures. All of this powered by Azure AI and Microsoft's decades of innovation. Microsoft's AI is available through our Azure AI portfolio, which means you can easily bring these same capabilities into the technology you are building as well. Azure AI brings AI within reach of every developer and data scientist, with leading models to see, hear, speak, search, and understand. And our end-to-end platform supports mission-critical AI scenarios, from how you operate your business to how to serve your customers. Microsoft is invested in the responsible development and deployment of AI systems. Ultimately, our goal is to empower you to achieve more, whether it's at work or at play, every day.
So this is my favorite slide. This is the cheat sheet. This is a sampling of all of the things that you can do with Microsoft's Azure AI offering. And the reason why I call it a cheat sheet is, it's certainly not completely comprehensive, but the thing that I really like about it is it uses what I like to call Saturday language to describe the capability, because it is a heavy text base, right? And I think that I don't think it's by bad intention, but I think people tend to use a lot of acronyms and jargon. And again, if the goal here is to just feel like you walk out of here understanding a little bit more about what's possible so that you can then go think about what you might want to do with that, let the imagination wander. Personally, I need a list like this. I need less technical terms, more how would I actually do something with this capability. So this is what we would call the cheat sheet slide. And of course, it's, you can see it's super comprehensive, and it's all logos that I hope most folks in the room would recognize, right? These are applications that you're probably using already, and where you can come and experience some of these capabilities. And the thing to know about this is we talk about this at Microsoft as the Microsoft 1P to 3P strategy. And what I mean by that is everything that Eric Boyd, who's been on this stage before, everything that Eric's engineering team is building in terms of AI services and tools, those are PaaS offerings that we use our internal application teams to build and harden and test and scale. So when we have a new capability in our speech-to-text service, for example, Jeff Teeper and the Teams team might be the first team internally who are going to go and take advantage of that. So imagine what that does for the product, right? Massive testing, lots of feedback, real-time feedback, let me tell you. And we know when we ship it, it's something that can perform at the scale that you would need to support those types of services. So Teams, for example, 280 million active users per month. And so what does that mean? It means that when you use these services, you don't need to be concerned about will it perform, will it scale. These are things that we've already addressed. So it is a very continuous development cycle that we think that our customers can take major advantage of.
Car buying is a big decision. It's the second largest thing a person will do after buying a home. CarMax disrupted the industry by bringing honesty and transparency. We have tens of thousands of cars on our website or through our app. And without talking to a human being, customers can get overwhelmed.
The challenge that we had was that we only could create so much content. There's manual effort, there's research, the writing, there's the proofreading.
Our writers can only produce so much content a month. It would have taken them years to produce enough pages to be relevant.
Azure OpenAI service allows us to summarize all of the custom reviews and put it in a simple to read and understandable sentence.
We're able to take content and feedback from a lot of other customers, curate it, and create this very tailored content for a specific car.
Through the fine-tuning process, we're at 80% of the content goes through without a human needing to be involved. We're estimating an individual would take 11 years to do what OpenAI service has done in days. We have seen a significant increase in our search engine optimization.
Now, the editorial team, they're able to focus their time on the areas most beneficial to the company and to our customers. There's so much possibility with OpenAI service. We're innovating at a scale, at a pace like never before. It's going to change everything we do.
So this is meant to be an example of what I just said. So CarMax took the same services that we're using in many of our 1P applications and found a way to apply it to their world. So, the thing that jumped out at me as we were watching this is 11 years to a couple of days. And so that gets to the, employee productivity enhancement that AI certainly offers us. But then I think about the editorial team. I think about what people were thinking when they applied for the job. And I don't think that they were hoping to read page after page after page of user reviews about cars, right? They're on the editorial side. Their job is to think about how to delight users on their website and encourage them to engage with the content and try to figure out which car is best for me. And so instead of becoming what would have been effectively a massive data entry position, it truly became the editorial position that they aspired to. And I don't think anybody wants 11 years worth of data entry. And so, sorry, I'm having a hard time with this clicker, as you guys can tell. So yes, it saved time. Yes, you learn things that you wouldn't have learned otherwise because the volume of input is just too high to ask any human to synthesize into what's most important. But it's this last one that I get really excited about. I think people are feeling a lot right now, and this is a way of helping them feel more excited about the work that they're doing. But the other thing that came up out of this was something that I don't think that CarMax necessarily predicted was going to happen. They understood the problem statement, they were excited about the opportunity, but what also came out of this was the chance to enrich their relationship with their car partners, the manufacturers of the vehicles, because they may not all have this technology in place themselves, and so now they can have a deeper relationship with their partners. They can share some of this information that they learned by processing this data in this way. And of course, it's up to them if they want to monetize that or not. But nobody on the day one of the project where they were defining the requirements and what success was going to look like when they were done, did they say, hey, we want to make sure that we're going to learn all this stuff and we can share it back with our partners. So that's the other thing that we keep seeing over and over again as we talk to customers who are doing these projects. The space is so new, the possibilities are so limitless, new things come up all the time, things that they'd never considered. They might be new business models, or they could be new revenue models. They could just be new ways to delight and engage with their suppliers. So it goes beyond the initial scope of the project. So now, as I put my high school and college yearbook editor hat on, I used to be somebody who wanted to work in that content space. The other thing that occurs to me is, as humans, we're kind of naturally wired to tell stories, and this technology allowed that team to really focus on the thing that they wanted to do, which is tell stories about the cars. So now I'm going to roll you through a second video, similar themes.
So Spotify's mission has always been about helping millions of creators out there to be able to live off their work. Soundtrap is part of that mission. And now we're launching Soundtrap for Storytellers for collaborative podcast creation available directly in the browser.
Soundtrap for Storytellers is an easy-to-use platform if you want to record a podcast. And then we have a very simple publishing flow, so you can publish your episode straight to Spotify.
The problem is that there's very few podcast-specific tools out there. We heard that it's so hard to do editing of podcasts or audio in general. So then we looked into that problem and say, wouldn't it be better if we can actually edit audio as it was a text document? So you just cut and paste and move things around, and then automatically cut and paste the audio for you. It's a completely new way of thinking about how you can actually work with spoken word, and that's a very unique feature.
We are using Azure Cognitive Services, or more specifically, the speech service. Integrating with that was very easy and straightforward. We needed to find a partner that could provide that in the highest quality possible. And of course, we also needed high accuracy for the variety of accents and vocabulary and age and environmental conditions.
Every time you have this lag between that you want to do something that actually gets done in the creative kind of process, that hinders creativity. With Soundtrap for Storytellers, what we wanted to create is something that is super simple to use, catering for everyone that had this creative flow in them. So let's democratize storytelling together.
So if you've done any kind of podcast or audio editing, you'll know that the creative process is exciting, right? Figuring out what you're going to focus on, what's your topic, who are you going to get to participate in the podcast, recording the actual podcast. Like, those are all the parts of the project that are super exciting. And then you get to the editing part, and that is not as exciting, without question. And this idea that he said around democratizing the podcast process really resonated with me, because I do a lot of speaking events. We do a lot of videos as a team. I don't get to participate in the production part hardly at all. It's a different group of people who do it. It's a different skill set. And frankly, it hasn't changed in like 2 decades. The way that we edit video and audio has really not evolved. And so that's why this one caught my attention. Having done that work before, having not been in a position where I could participate in it today, it's a gap. And so in a text format, non-specialized tools, you have the opportunity to bring more people into the editing process, and of course it's faster. And nobody likes going back and forth on the slider to try and get to the right spot. So it's certainly faster, it's easier to do, but you can also bring more people into the process. And my daughter, who's 11 years old yesterday, has over, I think she's up to like 4,000 followers on YouTube. And please don't judge me for letting my 11-year-old have a YouTube channel. She does all these animated videos, and she does that talk track on top because we don't have her in front of the camera. And so when I showed her this video, her reaction to it was immediate. You mean I could just edit it like I'm editing a text message? And I said, yeah. And her brain just kind of, her 11-year-old brain just kind of exploded. And so I think that's what we're going for here by bringing this capability. You can really, take the drudgery out of the work and focus on what's fun about it, which is figuring out what you're actually producing at the end. So facilitating the creative process, improving the increased, efficiency of the folks that are involved in the work. These are all things that I think we understand really, really well. And so if I were to sort of summarize what I've talked about, with our platform, we do believe that we are truly offering these capabilities that reduce the time and production times, increase the value, take the drudgery out of things that can be easily automated. You can certainly develop these things at scale. We talked about how everything that we're offering is something that's already being used by the internal Microsoft team to build really well-known and time-tested products like Xbox and Microsoft Outlook and Teams. And so I think all of that makes sense. And I think that people are seeing the opportunity. I think we see the acceleration. We're seeing a ton of adoption. But I do think that there's kind of an elephant in the room. And what I mean by that is if I were to go back to maybe a decade ago when we first started really focusing on cloud, I did a lot of meetings and customer conversations where there was this sort of this uncertainty, this tone that said, yes, I see what you're saying, and I think it's great, and I believe you in terms of what it's going to do for us. But there's recognition, maybe unspoken, that we're not ready to do it. And if I go back to cloud adversity, and I think about a lot of CIO conversations, if you think back to the point where cloud was really becoming strong, we had just gotten through the mess of the internet, right? We had just gotten to the point where things were fairly organized, and teams were feeling good about security, and we were starting to see strong motions in terms of data governance. And IT had a lock on it. It was organized, and it was secure. And the teams felt like they were, from a skill set perspective, understanding what needed to be done. And then cloud comes along, and it's like, well, we've taken all those control mechanisms away. I kind of think that AI is having the same moment. And what I mean by that is, yes, we get that it's high value, lots of efficiency, our teams will be more excited, our customers will be more excited, the blending of expectations of consumer and the workplace, like we get all that. But it's not like I have 1,000 people running around who really understand this technology. And similar to the concerns about risk and security that you saw with just sort of stepping back in terms of control of your servers and your environment with cloud, I think we see the same thing with AI. Putting aside, sort of the broader concerns about how it will be used over time, I think as a person working at an organization that's trying to bring these capabilities to bear, you recognize that it's not like you have 10 years of experience doing it. And so this is where, I'm super proud to work at Microsoft because we have taken such an incredible position on this. Our emphasis of engineering innovation alongside responsible use of this technology is really second to none. And we recognize that it's a journey we're all on together, but we're also extremely principled about it. And I think it almost goes beyond the how do we take the concern out of it. It really gets into what we intend to be, which is everybody's partner in this journey. And so when I think about, yes, I have a strategy, now I think I know where I'm going to use it, I see an opportunity with the next application that we're going to build, we're going to look at all this technology. I do think that the people that are trying to make those decisions want to do it in a way where they feel like, and I'm going to do this in a responsible way, and I'm not going to create risk or terrible experiences for our customers or employees. I need help on the how. How do I do that? Because I don't have a ton of experience in this space, and it's all new. And so I'm very excited to bring, it's a surprise guest, I'm bringing Susan Ettlinger on stage. She works with me, and she has been working on Microsoft's responsible AI initiatives for a long time now, and she's going to walk you through everything that we're doing to make this possible. Yeah, you can. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. So I was having pizza with my son the other day, Sunday, and we're at this restaurant, and it's like one of those pizza places where like the tables are really close together. And next to me were these three guys, and they're having this conversation. And, I keep hearing, and they're kind of arguing with each other, and I'm like trying not to listen, but I can't help. And I'm like, I hear, it totally understands inflation. Totally does not understand inflation. Well, what about inflating a balloon? And of course, what are they talking about? GPT-3, right, at the pizza restaurant. So if I think back on when I started looking at AI, 6, 8, almost 10 years ago, so much has changed, right? We've got so much innovation happening. Companies are using AI in ways that are unprecedented. And the last few years, as Jessica said, we're kind of having a moment with AI. And so at the same time, what's happening is that societal expectations about how we use these technologies, because they are technologies, not a single technology, are evolving. And the kinds of news stories that you see now in the press, the kinds of questions people are asking are so much more sophisticated than they were. And as a result, of course, we expect that the regulatory environment is responding. And so I want to walk you through the way that we think about responsible AI at Microsoft and just give you a sense of what that looks like. So, we've been thinking about this topic at Microsoft, and I'm still pretty new to the company, but have been thinking about it at Microsoft for about 6 years. Back in 2016, Satya wrote an article kind of laying out some early responsible AI thinking, and I'm not going to walk through this whole timeline, but if you look at the milestones, what you'll see is, number of places where we're adding organizational capacity, operational capacity. The Ether team, for example, which is essentially an advisory board to the senior leadership team, looking at AI in engineering. We have Microsoft Research doing a tremendous amount of research on responsible AI. We have teams obviously in legal and policy. So we're engaging across the business. And over the course of the last few years, we've seen a few things happen that I think are particularly relevant for all of you. One of them is the introduction of our responsible AI dashboard. And then the most recent, in June of 2022, just a few short months ago, was the public release of what we call our responsible AI standard. And the responsible AI standard is our internal playbook for how we develop AI at Microsoft. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit more of this, but just to set some context, we start with principles. And if you're reading the stories about AI, MIT Technology Review, Wired, et cetera, most organizations now who are working with AI have principles, and they're important. On the top, we have these 4: fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, and then underpinning all of those are transparency and accountability. So fairness is really about ensuring that, or attempting to ensure that anybody who is developing an AI system, that system performs the same, with the same level of quality irrespective of somebody's identity and things like that, right? So we want to make sure that the outcomes are fair across groups, all things being equal. Reliability and safety has, of course, always been a watchword here. The big difference with reliability and safety in an AI context is that AI systems are probabilistic, not rules-based. So that makes things a little bit more complicated. Then in terms of privacy and security, of course, we're looking at threat detection and ensuring that we keep private data private, because if there's one thing that artificial intelligence systems love, it's data, lots and lots of it. So that requires us to really do deep thinking about how we use that data. Inclusiveness is kind of an interesting one because AI actually creates opportunities around accessibility that didn't exist before. And you're looking at one of them now as you're seeing what I'm saying show up on the screen. That's language understanding technology. And so that can create the capability for people who may not have computers or who may have disabilities. I think there are like 1 billion people in the world who have some kind of identified disability to use technology and to get the value out of it. Now, for transparency, the important thing here is to think about the fact that these systems, in order for us to be able to remediate issues and to look at them across the organization, they have to be intelligible. So, of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with intelligibility or interpretability technologies that are coming on board, and of course, we've got some in our responsible AI dashboard as well. And then accountability, that we need to be accountable for the systems that we create. But here's the thing. Principles by themselves are not enough. We need to think about it a little bit differently from just the principles and done, right? The reasons being, they're not self-executing. You know, it's not like I say, okay, AI systems must be fair. Okay, fine, let's all go home. It's that we need to have a way to act on that, right? That needs to come next. The next thing is that they're open to interpretation. So if I say fairness or transparency to you, or I were to tell you an anecdote and ask you to judge, was this fair or was this not fair? You might all have different perspectives, and that's normal and human and, you know, part of the challenge, right? And so we need to have a way to take these principles and make them actionable and be clear about what it is that we are trying to accomplish. And then finally, they're not capable of answering the question, which I'm sure is on everyone's mind, well, how do you do this? So let me talk a little bit more about that. So we have a framework, right? It's not just the principles. We have an operational framework here that we use in Microsoft. Governance is the foundation. It's always the foundation, right? Then we have a set of rules, which I'll talk about. The rules, of course, being specifically what do we do, what don't we do, and why. And then training and practice to instantiate that throughout the organization. And then finally, tools and processes, right? Things that you can see and use now. So in June, we announced the Responsible AI Standard version 2. We released it to the market. And the thing that's different about this from really a lot of other things that I've seen is that, you know, this is an internal policy document. It is our playbook. And what we did was to make a decision to make some of that available to all of you and to the market at large so that you could see how we record our practice of responsible AI by design, which is our approach to developing AI systems. So this is our guidebook for how we intend to build systems. The next is that it gives us a framework. And frameworks need to be durable, right? Because things change, circumstances change, but the North Star doesn't change. And so this gives us a way of thinking about new technologies as they come online against the question of what is the impact on fairness? Is this as transparent and intelligible as something else? What are some of those challenges? How do we think about that? And then finally, it reflects our deeper explanation of what these principles mean. So it helps us to kind of deepen that understanding. I will tell you that, you know, well, before I was at Microsoft, I was an industry analyst, and I looked very closely at responsible AI. And a lot of what I saw in organizations, it was as much about the culture shift that was happening as it was actually about the work that was being done from a tooling perspective or from a practice and training perspective. So that's a really big part of it too, because part of what we want to do is enable that conversation, that deliberation about what does this mean, and put that in the coding path, right? So that people are thinking about that process as they build. So when we get to the goals of the standard, this is where you start to see the real specificity. And I will say specificity, understanding that many of you are engineers, if not all of you, and specificity to me may be different to you. That's all open to interpretation as well. But it starts to give you a sense of how we think about these principles in action. So when you think about accountability, the first thing that we have done, and I will point you to this, is an impact assessment template. Well, that impact assessment template allows teams to go through in a very structured way and think about the impact of their system on the world at large, on business, on society, very much the way that an environmental impact assessment might work, right? So it starts with this first principle of what is it that we are trying to do? What could be the outcomes of that? How could we potentially remediate those? And then I won't go through every single one of the 17 rules, but some of them are really interesting to point out. One of them is around the documentation of significant adverse impacts. So if we know or suspect that there may be an adverse impact, that we need to think about how it is that we remediate that. We need to have human oversight and control, right? So those are just a few pieces of the accountability puzzle. Next, we go to transparency, and we want to make sure, of course, that the systems are intelligible, and intelligible in a useful way, right? There's useful and there's not so useful. We want to communicate to stakeholders, and of course, we want to disclose when AI systems are in operation. And this becomes very, very interesting when you think about things like custom neural voice, which sounds like a regular human voice. It's not, those old phone trees and things like that. You're not talking to a real person. Today, it's really hard. And, all of us, I'm sure, in the last few years have had several experiences, in call centers or elsewhere where you're not sure whether you're interacting with AI or interacting with a person. Now, maybe in the future, our values about that, or our collective societal understanding of AI will be such that it's an expectation, the way that the internet is now an expectation. But we want to be very transparent about that. Then in terms of fairness, quality of service. So for example, the people on this side of the room should have the same quality of service as the people on this side of the room. We want to make sure that people get equal or fair allocation of resources, whether that resource is a loan or a medical decision, medical insight, or something else that affects your livelihood. And we want to make sure that we minimize any kind of stereotyping or demeaning outputs. And you've probably seen many stories over the years that talk about some of those types of outputs and how they can happen because, of course, algorithms work differently from the human brain. Now, in terms of reliability and safety, these are all things that, of course, are in our life, they're in our DNA. But as I said, the thing that makes AI different is that it's probabilistic. So errors are kind of to be expected, right? You can't have a statistical probability without, having to do something with your model to fit it to make sure that you are getting the right kinds of outputs. And of course, there are many, many trade-offs involved. And so the more we're able to deepen our understanding of that, the more that we're able to kind of delve into those issues, the better. And then privacy and security and inclusiveness I'll talk about together, because while the four at the top were very much kind of new things that we need to think about with AI, we've been thinking about inclusiveness, and we've been thinking about privacy and security for quite some time. And so it's how do we adapt our existing policies to this new world of AI. So then on top of that, we have a sensitive uses team and a process. And what this means is that if a system has a consequential impact, meaning that it could affect somebody's livelihood, their human rights, et cetera, their physical or emotional, psychological well-being, we want to look at that consequential impact. We also want to look at any kind of physical or psychological injury, potentially, right? And then we also want to look at anything that could have a threat to human rights. So let me just give you a very simple example, since we're on a driving kick today. If you were to think about computer vision, using computer vision to identify a tree because you want to drop a photo of a tree into your PowerPoint deck or whatever it may be that you want to do, make an ad, whatever that might be. That's one use case for computer vision to identify a tree. But if you want to use computer vision to identify a tree for an autonomous vehicle, or even any kind of vehicle, that's a whole different thing, right? And so that's what we mean by consequential impact. So I'm not going to go into this in detail. You can download this from the Responsible AI website. But we do have templates for you that help you think through some of these steps. These are the templates that we use internally at Microsoft. So there's a section on project overview. There's a section laying out the intended uses. It's intended to help you structure your thinking because sometimes responsible AI can feel like a little bit of a monolith to people. So this is the product of all of these months and years of thinking about what does it look like to build organizational capacity. Then you document the impacts, you look at your data requirements, and then you do a summary at the end. And this is something that we think is very useful. We also have transparency notes. You've heard of model cards. There are other types of ways of doing this. This is our approach. And we find them really helpful to help you understand how the technology works, and also to socialize that in your organization, because that's important. And then finally, we have these tools that we're making, and are making and have made available through the Responsible AI dashboard. You can all use them. You can find them on the Responsible AI website at Microsoft. We have Interpret ML, which helps you understand, it's an intelligibility tool. We have error analysis for models. We have Fair Learn, which helps you understand fairness outputs. Counterfeit, Hacks Toolkit, which is about user experience. So you can kind of go through these tools, use these tools, and then use the other tools and templates that we've provided as well. And the idea here is for us all collectively to build capacity to better understand this, because it is complex. So I wanted to just, first of all, say thanks. I hope this has been useful to you and helped you understand our journey at Microsoft around responsible AI. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic back to Jessica to bring us all home. Thank you.
Me and this thing are in a fight, but I'll take it, I guess. Okay, so we've covered what we're seeing in terms of conversations and adoption with our customers. We've talked about how these capabilities are showing up within Microsoft's 1P solutions, things like Outlook and Teams, Xbox. And then we've dug into how some customers are doing these things in their own world. And then Susan's covered our commitment to making sure that everybody is feeling like we're a partner in terms of doing this responsibly. So then I'm going to put my other hat on, so data and AI, and talk a little bit about what makes all of this possible, because the AI technology is, of course, heavily dependent on the data estate. So I'm going to walk you through the Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform. This is something that we announced at our Build conference in May. And truly what this is meant to be is a way to think about all the things that are incorporated in your data environment, whether it's operational databases, analytics systems, or the data governance that you need in order to make these things real in applications when you get to people actually doing something with the data. And the point here is that when we design these services, they've all come up over the years at different points in time, we recognize that there's very few projects that are done with any one of these things. It's almost always a combination of several. And so, as I think about, I used to be a developer, as I think about the work that you do on the project, it's kind of similar to what we talked about during the AI discussion, which is I want to focus on what I'm building. I don't want to focus on the plumbing so much. And so with the Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform, by design, we're making these things more easy to use together. And so, an example of that is the identity work, the rules that you put in place from product to product to product within that one solution. You don't want to have to continuously define who can do what access do they have, what are the rules. And so we have Microsoft Purview sitting on top of all of these solutions to make that governance task that exists within the project development cycle, code it once, use it often. And so what we're really saying here is we're trying to put an end to the integration tax. There's a great quote from the CDO of Gartner, it's fairly recent, where he said, I came to be the chief data officer, I don't want to be the chief integration officer. And I think that, as these products have come up over time, and it's certainly not just a Microsoft thing, there's a lot of this combination to get to the outcome. And so think of the intelligent data platform as a way to reduce the integration tasks, spend more time building what you're trying to build, and less on the plumbing to stitch it all together. And so if I were just going to take a minute, because I think we have some data folks in the audience, and we'll geek out for a minute on data stats, because it's fun to do. They tell me that by 2025, we're predicted to have 181 zettabytes of data. And frankly, I didn't even use the word zettabytes, right? I don't even know what that word means. I don't think anybody really knows what that word means. So if I were to try to unpack it, and this isn't news to anybody, it's not like we all aren't aware that there's data sprawl at scale. So they said if you take 1 zettabyte, that would be like 1 grain of rice. And if you took if you take 1 zettabyte, that's 1 grain of rice. There are enough grains of rice in that zettabyte to fill up the Pacific Ocean. So then you have to imagine 181 Pacific Oceans. So the data sprawl it's not a concept, it's not something that we think is coming, it's absolutely coming here now. And so in order to get a handle on all of this, it's no longer possible to think we can govern it internally and we'll just make sure we've got it all under control. You really need systems and tools in place to do that. And the Microsoft Intelligent Data Platform is intended to make that easier. And so why does it matter? Well, in order to use the AI solutions that we just talked about earlier, you do have to have a handle on your data estate in order to make them real. And I think we've all talked a ton about digital transformation over the last several years. And the thing that it's always been a struggle for me. It's described often as this linear path. We're going to decide that we're going to get a handle on our data estate. We recognize that our data is living in silos in lots of different places. It's hard to make sure that people have the right access to the right information. So we're going to start this initiative, we're going to do this project, we're going to go on this journey. But the thing about it is it's not really something that you start and then you finish. It's more about what happens as you start to do the projects. You start to see this, again, virtuous cycle. And so I would say it's more of a digital feedback loop than it is a start here and get there. And so an example that I like to use to make this real is we've all talked about the value of product development teams wanting to have access to the information that the customer support team has. So please, can I have a copy of the tickets? I want to crawl through them and look for trends because I want to recognize what's popping the most often so we can go fix it. And so the way that we've always done this is, you end up with these governance meetings and you stand up these cadences. Once a month, we're going to review. Once a quarter, once a week. It doesn't scale. So if I go back to my crazy Pacific Ocean example, if there's that much signal coming in, there's no chance that you can apply a human-only solution. So you need this system-driven way of learning. And so if I go to the CarMax example, it's sentiment analysis, right? Totally different application, but same problem statement. I want to get a read on what is popping as the biggest problem or the biggest opportunity for us to get back to our development team so we can get it into the backlog and we can go build it. And so I would really describe this as a loop, and it never stops. This is not a project you start and 3 years later you're done. It's an ongoing journey. And I think people understand that there is a tremendous amount of value in going on this journey. The results sort of speak for themselves. Data-driven transformation are absolutely making a difference. And I think we were already on this path before COVID hit, but once it did, having some kind of agility and flexibility in your infrastructure, in your IT environments, a way to respond to the change, because it was a change that nobody saw coming, was incredibly helpful for the companies who had started that process. And so we're seeing, amazing statistics in terms of revenue growth, in terms of profitability, and yes, it's 54% revenue and 54% profit. I checked that. Tons of speed and agility, and of course, the most important thing is improved customer satisfaction. So if we cover everything that we've talked about the opportunity and the fact that AI is absolutely a must-have, not a nice-to-have, and that it's happening now and it's happening fast. And we've talked about ways that you can think about using these capabilities and the importance of getting the data estate in a position where you could begin to take advantage of them. And so the hope is that you leave the room feeling like you're a little bit more aware of what the places are that you can explore, and that you can essentially let your imagination wander and let your mind wander about where you can pull all this into your world. So if I were to quickly summarize before I close, AI is absolutely a defining technology. It is the moment we're in right now. The time is now. I would say it's happening faster than maybe anybody predicted. And the impacts of these data-driven transformations are big. You cannot do one without the other. You really have to think about this as a combined effort. The data estate needs to be in a position. You need to have that digital feedback loop going in order for you to take advantage of these opportunities. It's a catalyst for growth. I talked about the example where CarMax suddenly had an opportunity to engage with their suppliers in a way that they wouldn't have necessarily predicted when they started the project. We see examples of that all the time. And for sure, we recognize both the importance of deploying these solutions responsibly and the fact that the world needs to partner in order to do it well. So a lot more emphasis on the how do we get started? How do we do this with confidence? And everybody in this room plays a super integral role into making this happen. All right, I'm going to wrap now, but before I do, I just want to let you know that Kevin Scott, who's our CTO, posted a blog yesterday morning. He looked at what we did in AI in 2022, not just from a Microsoft perspective, but more broadly from what's happening in the industry, and his predictions for 2023. And I hope that you have a chance to read it and really go back to everything that you learned here and let your imagination wander and think about how can I make this happen for me. Thank you.